me to begin by saying that we have always existed as a British colony with an established church, a state church. And what does this mean? And the church, by the way, the Church of England, until just a few days ago. It means that our laws require all persons in Virginia to attend church at least once a month. 1 week in 4. If you don't go to church, you're fined stiffly. Part of the purpose of having this required attendance at church is to ensure not only that we're reinforcing the mild and benevolent precepts of the gospel of Jesus, but it's also to ensure that we have the best possibly informed public. Half our population still cannot read. Greater number besides do not subscribe to newspapers. And so information that has just occurred, say, in our capital city, new laws or writs of election, such things as this, will always be disseminated to the people in that period of public official announcements at divine services, and that clearly is a very useful function. Thus, I submit to you that church and state have heretofore always been inseparably bound. It is my view that the direct aim of government is liberty, and clearly the direct aim of religion is morality. And those two must go hand in hand. For if there is no morality or virtue, there will not be liberty for very much longer. Amen. And this again, based on thousands of years of history. I and many gentlemen regard a man by the name of Montesquieu, the Baron de Montesquieu, to be the founder of the notion that politics and government can be studied like a science, and thus it can be predicted. He has written extensively of all different frames of government, including that of a republican form of government, which we've erected here in Virginia, and clearly and convincingly demonstrates a republic cannot hope to survive, let alone to flourish, unless the people within that republic are virtuous and moral and adhere to the mild and benevolent precepts of the gospel of Jesus. For otherwise, you will have the Republic of Rome, which, to remind you, collapsed most awfully, rivers of blood, the countryside all ablaze, and owing to rampant immorality and depravity. Thus, I believe that if we were one day to separate completely morality, or religion, from public affairs, it would eventually lead to a decline in morality, in heightened depravity and immorality, and I fear that if such a day should come, one would have to place a sheriff or an undersheriff at every street corner and crossroads. As a young man by the name of Webster, Noah Webster, has recently stated, man by necessity must be governed or controlled by either a power within him or a power without of him, either by the word of God or by the strong arm of man, either by the Bible or by the bayonet. Looking to the future, we clearly cannot have the Church of England as our state church any longer. King George, after all, is the head of that church. And furthermore, we're at war, which is a most expensive and costly business. The convention and now the legislature has determined that we just won't have any continued tax monies applied to support religion and religious teachers until this war is ended. It will end in 8 years, finally. 1783 with the Treaty of Paris. And the very next year, the question of that relationship between church and state will be vigorously and hotly contested. In effect, there will be 3 different camps. The old guard, of course, staunch Episcopalians, the Tidewater gentry, want to continue with that which we always knew and which generally served us well. A single church. We'll call it the Church of Virginia. Protestant Episcopal Church, what we will. Everyone pays taxes to it. It alone sees to the care of the poor and the needy, which is one of the principal reasons we pay taxes, by the way, to support religious institutions. On the opposite side of the aisle altogether will be a plan, I believe, most dangerous, chiefly led by Messrs. Jefferson and Madison. And they will argue for a perpetual disestablishment of religion. That is to say, no tax money is applied at all to support Christian teachers. They will rely instead upon the natural purity and generosity of men. Mr. Jefferson was a lawyer for only a very short while, and perhaps the reason he was so miserable at that occupation was because, unlike me, he doesn't have the first clue about the nature of men. I will offer a third plan which offers a happy medium betwixt the two others. The best of the old, in that it once again encourages state-sponsored support for Christian teaching, and the best of the new in that it no longer tolerates different denominations. It allows them the complete freedom to worship the Creator in their own chosen mode. My plan will be called the Assessment Bill of 1784, and by it, once again, there will be a very moderate, reasonable tax applied to religion, to religious teachers. You'll be able to choose, however, to which church or meeting house or minister you want those monies to be applied. In my view, everyone wins. I believe that the denominations of all Christian forms will flourish around the countryside. We will continue to promote virtue and morality in our society and look ahead to a very bright and prosperous future. Unfortunately, there will then be some very devious politicking taking place by a true master of the game. I speak of young Jemmy Madison, that upstart. He, in effect, is a creature of Thomas Jefferson's. Mr. Jefferson will go to France to serve as plenipotentiary of these United States, and meanwhile, Mr. Madison will be doing his bidding in trying to promote Mr. Jefferson's statute of religious freedom. They know how formidable I am in debate on the floor of the legislature. They also know that I have a great deal of support for my assessment bill. One day, Mr. Jefferson, in fact, worried that I'm going to carry the day, is going to write a letter to Mr. Madison. In code, of course, because they will devise some very clever codes when they write these letters back and forth. And included in that letter will be this delightful and very Christian sentiment. And I quote, "What we must needs do now is devoutly pray for Mr. Henry's death." Nice fellows. And, well, Mr. Madison is going to arrange the next best thing. He is going to convince all of his fellows to elect me to a fourth term as governor. You see, as governor, I won't be able to use my very persuasive skills at rhetoric in promoting my own bill. And as a result, it will simply die a quiet death. The following year, in 1785, a majority of the legislature will adopt Mr. Jefferson's statute for religious freedom. And on that day, I will caution my future generations, as well as my fellow public servants, that unless you are able to promote virtue somehow, you'll one day have to place a sheriff or an under-sheriff at every street corner and crossroads. Christianity softens the human heart. It cherishes and improves its finer feelings. It restrains men from their vices. It promotes good order and adherence to civil law. Is this not something that should be encouraged?